Africa's economy is on the rise, with several countries projected to see significant growth in 2025. But beneath these progress, challenges persist, like rising debt, inflation, political instability, and insecurity. They continue to threaten the continent. Now, can this growth be sustained despite these hurdles? And what does 2025 hold for the continent's economic future? This is The Conversation. I'm Darshan Usman. Let's talk. Recent reports from the African Development Bank, Chatham House, UN Africa Renewal, and also a coverage by the Sierra Leone Telegraph all indicate that Africa is poised for continued economic growth in 2025, even as global economic prospects remain subdued. Now, while the continent still faces significant challenges that I've listed earlier, and others such as governance issues, inequality, and also infrastructural deficits, the combination of improved fiscal policies and a focus on domestic growth is expected to keep the economy on an upward path. But overall, Africa's economic fundamentals remain strong, and the continent is well positioned for continued growth in 2025. Now, to unpack this and more, we're actually joined by three gentlemen. I'm joined, first of all, by Ogbonna Ukuku. He's an economic development expert in Abuja. We also have joining us Professor Simeon Nnah. He is a public affairs analyst in Lagos, and also Wisdom Chapp-Jumbo, a public affairs analyst in Lagos as well. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us.
All right, thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you for being here.
All right, so let me begin with Mr. Ukuku. Now, the UN report states that Africa's economy, is to improve in 2025 despite global stagnation. How reliable are these projections?
Okay, so the projections are quite clear because when you look at Africa, so I like to use the word most countries are already very saturated when it comes to growth dynamics, when it comes to level of investment that can go into such countries. But when it comes to Africa, that's just something that we have that a lot of countries don't have, or a lot of continents don't have, rather. And those things are, we have a youth population that most continents don't have, and we have this. We have natural resources that they are still yet untapped. When I say yet untapped, because whether we would like it or not, anything that is not comprehensively designed to build the next, to build an output. I say that in the sense that as it is now, when it comes to the solid mineral sector, when it comes to agriculture, when it comes to manufacturing, even in infrastructure as we speak, because we're a virgin land, I call it a virgin land, there's still so much to be done. So that is why the trajectory, the growth trajectory is actually, is well designed to favor Africa, because whether we like it or not, all we just need to do is to introduce a few more dynamism when it comes to being able to understand our disparities and how to pull them together to achieve better results. Just like the Southeast Asia did, 4 decades ago. China wasn't what it is today, and some other countries, Vietnam and some other countries around that hemisphere, they are not what they are today. They were not what they are today. So having said that, so I believe the prediction is right, and I know those things are having the level of leadership that we're beginning to introduce in Africa. There'll be a great shift, because there's just something about when a cup gets full, there must be that outpouring. So there's just that saturation that has occurred, and everybody's looking at, okay, where is the next place to go to? So the entire globe, just like it happened to China, it happened to Vietnam, it happened to other parts of Southeast Asia. That's exactly what's going to happen to Africa.
All right, now let's hear from Professor Nnah. Professor Nnah, you've heard Mr. Ukuku. He did say that he agrees with the prediction and also the projection. And we also know that Chatham House's report says that Africa in 2025, that economic growth despite persistent problems, suggests that there will be robust growth and it can actually coexist with some structural challenges. Let's hear from you, Professor.
Yes, I don't want to sound pessimistic, but I've listened to economists. I've listened to Additional, who actually championed this discourse. And he mentioned certain strategic indices, like Africa having 455 million youth, able youth that can drive this. He mentioned the arable lands in Africa, uncultivated. He talked about how they sponsored Ethiopia, and today they are self-sufficient in wheat and stuff like that. Well, those things are good on paper. Those minerals we are talking of, like the minerals is talked about in Congo DR that could be used, to produce electric cars, they have been there. The gold we have in Nigeria has been there. The gold they have in Ghana has been there. The products, the arable products like cocoa and what have you, we've been producing them. My question is, what have we been doing with them? We'll just suddenly wake up in 2025 and these things will just blossom. I don't think it will.
Okay.
Now, if you look at Nigeria, use Nigeria as a case study.
All right, we seem to be having a network issue with Professor Nnah. We'll try to fix that, but let's come to you, Mr. Chapp-Jumbo. If you can hear me, Professor Nnah did list some of the factors that would likely, help in the economic growth in 2025 of Africa, right? Now, which of the persistent issues, do you believe would pose the greatest risk, to long-term stability when it comes to Africa, and the prediction of economic growth?
All right, thank you. Confirm if you can hear me, Claire.
Yeah, I can hear you clearly. Please go ahead.
Oh, okay, fantastic. So, it's a fantastic report, and it's good to hear that Africa is on the positive. We are growing in that direction, which is good. I think this report came off the recent AU meeting in Addis Ababa, which is fantastic. But despite the positive trajectory of the report that we are looking, Africa still sort of struggle with a few things. So we have the geopolitical tensions in a few areas. We have the climate-related issues. We have energy problem, energy access problem in many African countries. And all of these, are still sort of the things that can pull us back. At the recent Africa Energy Summit in Dar es Salaam, in Tanzania, it's good to see that African leaders come together to sign a declaration to close energy access gap, at least for 300 million Africans. So we have like 600 million Africans that don't have access to energy. So we're trying to pull out in the next 5 years, 300 Africans, which I think is good. So the issue of power or energy access will be solved from that kind of commitment, which is fantastic. So we'll see how other issues like the geopolitical tension, we'll see how other issues like the climate-related disasters that might also not help us achieve the goal we want to achieve. But the biggest in the room, again, is leadership. There needs to be a leadership problem to fix. We need to fix in all the different African countries so that there can be sustainable progress of this kind of report we're seeing. So when you look at it now, at the end of the day, how many of these African countries are committing to this? Because leadership will tie to the kind of policies that will come out of these African countries. If we don't have the right kind of policies to sustain this kind of positive results we're seeing, that the African Development Bank is sharing, everything is going to go back to ground zero. Just like the last speaker was saying, we have all these resources and we have all these numbers for a while. What have we done with it? Everything speaks to policies. So if we don't have governments in these African countries who are working to fix the issue of policy in their different countries, then we might fall back to the issue where we are coming from again. So while this is a good result, some of these issues, we need to address them as soon as possible so that we can unlock this economic growth and sustainable development we are looking to have. So I've mentioned a few things. Leadership is a problem that leads to policy making, which ties directly to sustain development if we want to achieve that. We have also the issue of solving energy access problems. We have the issue of geopolitical tensions in a few areas that we need to address. Climate-related disasters. What are we doing about that even as a continent so that we don't suffer any economic downtime? Remember that we are just recovering from COVID. So being in 2025 is like a recovery mood from the COVID period. That's why even Nigeria itself, in explaining or analyzing its own inflation as the base sort of the year we are looking at from inflation, and they say, oh, let's look at it from 2024 upwards. That's the base now they're setting, and not 2009 that it used to be before. So that will show you that we are now coming out from the COVID recovery mode, and there's quite a lot that we need to now work on if we need to achieve.
But wisdom. Surely, I'm sure these reports, these organizations did see the challenges. They're aware of these challenges. That's the reason why they still came out with the result, because with the report, because even the AFDB reported improved fiscal and debt positions across many African nations. So, if you're saying that we need to fix some of these hurdles that are along the way before we're able to see these projections, even though Professor Nnah was kind of pessimistic about, the projections, can you elaborate on the most promising figures or even indicators that signal fiscal sustainability?
Okay, good. One of it is, I said earlier, is leadership. I think a lot of Africa's progress is tied on the kind of leadership we put together in these different countries. Like I said, leadership will lead to the issue of proposing the right kind of policies for the country to sustain what we have or what we see now as the progress economically across the African countries. So where I see where there needs to be more work if we want to achieve results is solving the issue of leadership. And in many African countries, we still have not a kind of, how will I put it now, leadership that works in a way for them. So they are still struggling with putting the right kind of leaders that want to set the right kind of vision for the country. So if we don't fix this issue, we may not see some sustained progress from what we have seen and recorded and AFDB is reporting. What AFDB has reported is fantastic, is good. You look at that coming from the COVID recovery mood, that all countries, where Africa was really affected. And this is a positive sign to show that there's indeed progress. We have the resources, we have the numbers, we have the young people in their numbers. So there's like progress for us already for us to begin to work with. So the issue is leadership, but I use Nigeria for example. In Nigeria now, we know that one of the major things we're lacking that has really stifled our progress as a country is leadership. We indeed have not had the leadership that can pull the country together and focus on the right issues. We still have leaders who are not really having that whole idea of visioning for the country and also saving for the future of the country. So that's affecting us in many ways. If you look at even the subnationals, the same issue. So it's similar problem for Ghana, similar problem for different African countries. If you look at Ghana, for example, before John Dramani Mahama came in, when he came in also, he also analyzed a few challenges for the country that he needs to retract, which is why he was voted for. If you look at how the economy of Ghana was before he came in, he also said why he won the election. He needs to change the direction for that. So there needs to be a lot of work. Similar cases in different African countries. Okay. So the major for me at the core of all of this, if we want to achieve sustained progress with the results we're seeing now, we need to solve that leadership problem. It ties to the politics, it ties to the policies that we're going to make. People-oriented policies will sustain the result we are seeing now. that would tie to what we want to see as economic growth and sustainable development. So I think those are my thoughts on that.
All right, now let's come back to you, Mr. Ukuku. Wisdom has said quite a lot, and he talked about leadership, as one of the major challenges. He also said that we don't have leaders that focus on the right issues and also are able to save, to, protect, secure, even sustain the country, which brings us to, to debt, because there's so many countries in Africa that, are not improving because of debt. Now, the AFDB has actually, in its report, has actually highlighted that, the debt positions will improve in most African countries. So what role do you see for international financial institutions, in further strengthening fiscal reforms, in the continent?
Most of the time, let me start by saying that the path from a state of anarchy to a centralized state is just that little bridge, and that bridge is a well-informed citizenry. So be it leadership, be it anybody that's going to emerge for leadership in any part of the world will still come from that critical mass of an informed citizenry. So the people who will vote or people who would want leadership to emerge, or where the leadership will emerge from, will still come from that critical mass. So it's just to add that before I answer your question, because everybody needs to we need to de-emphasize on the role of leadership and emphasize more on the people. So the people, what the people will say or what they do determines what what will emerge or what they will get as from leadership. But having said that, so let's go back to some of these issues that we're looking at. So if you x-ray Africa as a nation, you will see debt in itself has never been a problem. The problem is borrowing for the wrong thing. That has always been the problem. Now, you can't finance a railway from, let's say, Dar es Salaam to the nearest, to maybe, let's say, to Congo, and then that railway should be evacuating tin or to be evacuating lead. And then you don't do it properly, you don't do it strong enough, and then you don't put the project management system that will be able to deliver such a project, so that it will be able to give you that access to the export corridor, so that you can export the lead or the mineral, because these are heavy metals. And then at the end of the day, you expect a different result. So for me, paying attention to those critical infrastructure development is very key. So for me, the lenders are very, they're very tricky. I say that because monies are not given to everybody. Monies are only given to those known. So if you are not known, monies won't be given to you. So I believe the policy direction which the most African countries have actually embraced, which is public-private partnership, should be dosed properly, structured properly, because that's what will work. Now, public-private sector, that collaboration, that confluence would actually help a lot in Africa. And you can see it, he has done, the few transactions that we have seen that have done well in Africa is actually due to that method of delivery. So if debt continues to occur in Africa, so we need to look at what are those countries borrowing for. So we need to, have a refinancing strategy coming from international development finance institutions, coming from multilateral agencies, those who can help refinance, restructure some of those loans. So it's not a bad case. I say that because most countries in Africa, even in East Africa, most countries in Africa, West Africa will have a lot of countries with natural resources and human capital. And then you go to East Africa, you find, they have the climate, they have the horticultural, system that is working for them, agriculture, and and so on. I see a country like Botswana, for example. What they have been able to make from beef manufacturing or beef export, which is actually equivalent to what manufacturing contributes to the GDP of Nigeria. That's to show you that somebody has been paid attention to certain things, looking at the lifelines that they have. So I am not saying that, yes, we should isolate leadership when it comes to bringing direction, when it comes as development, but I'm saying
Okay, well, we'll come back to you, Mr. Ukuku. Now, let's come back to Professor Nnah. Professor Nnah, we actually lost you for a bit back there. Thank you so much for reconnecting. You were speaking before we lost you. Please go ahead with what you were saying. And also, if you could also tell us or how you can assess the risk of external shocks, you know, like commodity price fluctuations or even geopolitical tensions on Africa's emerging resilience.
That disagrees with anybody that says that the problem of Africa is not leadership, that we should de-emphasize leadership. I disagree entirely with that, because everything stops at the bulk of the leadership. Even the man in Abuja, the economist that's saying that we should de-emphasize leadership, he contradicted himself by saying when we borrow for the wrong reasons. He said the citizens that are borrowing is a leadership that's borrowing, and they borrow for the wrong reasons. You borrow for consumption. How do you now expect improvement when you borrow for consumption? You don't borrow for development. See, this, like he said, I agree with him that this Paris Club, they are lending, they are very tricky in their lending. And when they do that, they give some conditionalities that will make you not function. And I've always asked this question. Tell me any country that have taken the IMF conditionalities that have survived it. You know, they will ask you to devalue your currency. They will ask you not to subsidize. Why they are subsidizing in their own country? Subsidize anything. Why they are subsidizing in their own country? So Africa, like has been said, has the potentials to rise. But the challenge we have is that the leaders don't have the right direction. Now, in Nigeria, for instance, I was trying to give that example when you say you were not hearing me again. Now, in Nigeria, for instance, they are saying that this year, the inflation will come down to 15%. And the question we've been asking is, what are the economic indices to support your argument? People are still being killed in Benue and Plateau, which is the food basket of the country. Now, tariffs are being increased by customs and what have you. And when you increase these things, how do you now expect inflation to come down? We have had gold, we have had solid mineral in this country. What is happening to the solid mineral? Every minister that will come will tell us we are going to improve on solid mineral. Up till now, the solid mineral is still at the primary level. Nobody has told us how much we are getting from the solid mineral. See, I've said this succinctly before. Africa has the potential, if we have the right leadership, to rule the world. I'm telling you, because all the mineral, the problem we have is that we export all our materials raw to Europe. All the raw materials they need for whatever they are producing in Europe and America today come from Africa. So if we can come back and look at this, instead of exporting raw materials, we begin to export finished goods. Then that is when Africa will say they have arrived. We have all the things we need. Is it gold? Is it columbine? What? Just name it. Just name it. God has blessed Africa so much that what we need is the right leadership. And let me tell you, you see, everybody that rises up to see how Africa will develop, will I say Europe and America will eliminate it? America will eliminate it. Let me give you an example. If Gaddafi had been allowed, today, Libya would have been a country to beat in the world. And the way he started, and he started the EU. So he wanted a situation where Africa would have been a continent to reckon with in the world. But Americans didn't want that. They took him out. That has been the tragedy. So what we need in Africa is the right leaders. Once we get leaders that can de-emphasize running to Europe, running to America for, one loan or the other, we can do it in Africa. Now, Additional has given us an example that we can do it in Africa. He has done it with one African country, and they are now food sufficient in wheat. And he said that he's willing to replicate what he has done in some other African countries. The question, are our leaders willing to accept that?
Okay.
Because they are interested in the next election. They are not interested in the citizens of this country. Because if they are, Nigeria will not be in the state it is right away. Because there are several things that we will export outside crude that will even give us more money than crude. But everybody is depending on crude. The solid mineral in this country has not been tapped 1%. I can tell you that for free. We have not tapped our solid mineral 1%. So if we can develop the solid mineral industry, I can tell you for free that countries that will beat Nigeria in the world will be counted in our fingers.
All right. Thank you, Professor Nnah, for that. We can do it in Africa if our leaders are willing to do what needs to be done. And you did talk about, solid minerals, in Africa, helping us out in that aspect. Now, let's come to you, Wisdom, just before we take a quick break. Still talking about our natural resources. How significant is the contribution of these resource wealth in this projected growth?
Well, they are very significant. Africa is a continent that is rich in diverse resources, and in my view, I doubt that we've been able to harness, a substantial part of it. When we do that, in fact, you are going to see an exponential growth even in our economies, which is very critical. For example, look at Nigeria, from oil to other solid minerals. I doubt that we've been able to, harness a substantial part of it, or we've been able to also, we've not been able to also sort of manage it in the way and manner that it contributes immensely to our economic growth. So it's something that we need to look at. That's why when presenting that report, Dr. Adesina also mentioned that there is good growth prospects, for Africa. When you look at it, there's growth prospects for Africa. African economic is resilient, and there's good prospects in it, and we need to remain strong. But in remaining strong, we also need to now look at how do we better manage our resources? How do we manage the fundings that we receive? What kind of capital projects are we looking at that will drive the economy? So when we do look at all of this, then all we are tying back to is economic growth in itself. So the resources we have, we need to go back to look at is how do we harness it? For example, in the issue of power and energy, we need to rethink how are we doing the grid? How are we doing our policies on electricity? We need to harness more of renewable energy, the sun. That's the national resources that we have in abundance in Nigeria. How are we reusing the sun? How are we putting the renewables as part of our energy mix so that there's more good use of it that can help our economic growth? When there's power, when we have an economy or a country where there's constant electricity and there's power, automatically that feeds to boosting our economic growth as a country, because there will be more power for industries and companies and small businesses to even do much more. It means that there will be reduced costs because we can do many other things if we have constant electricity. Part of our problem in Nigeria, for example, is this issue of power we are able to fix for decades, and it continues to come to this point. So that's one part of the issue that we need to look at. And there are other resources that we need to leverage that I don't think Nigeria is indeed doing enough. There's tin, there's other solid minerals that I don't think we're leveraging enough. There's still so much theft. Crude oil, we know how much theft of that crude oil leaves the shores of the country unaccounted for every now and then. It's the similar situation in different African countries. So in trying to sustain this, we need to now watch that part of it. And then I'll go back again, there's an issue of policy that we need to now look at strongly, a proper coordination between our monetary and fiscal policies to better now manage this economy and be sure. Nigeria today, we are talking back and forth on the issue of inflation and how the NBS has rebased the dates when they are looking at our consumer, index, to look at it from 2024, matching that, to this year. So we need to do more on that area of monetary and fiscal policy to get more strength, for the economies. And it's the same issue with other African countries. So if that coordination is properly managed, then I think there's more we can achieve, especially how we are using our resources. The other part of it is also we need to do better with regional trade and investment. I'm not sure there's so much of that happening now, even with the African Free Trade Agreement on. There's really no much leveraging on that we see presently. We also need to do that. Someone will always say that traveling across Africa, even as an African, is more difficult, for Africans themselves. All of those issues also contribute to some of this. So regional trade and investment approach will also help the economy, but we need to be able to manage our resources. And how do we do that effectively is policies. What kind of policies are we putting in place? What kind of monetary and fiscal policies are in place to manage the economies for the different countries? So all of this you need to look at in that scale of it.
All right, now we'll take a quick breather now. When we come back, Mr. Ukuku, we'll definitely love to hear from you on, the natural resource wealth and, how it is significant, or it is a significant contribution to the projected growth, and also what Wisdom talked about on the African continental free trade as well. Do stay with us. Welcome back, and thank you for staying with us on the conversation. We're discussing recent reports from the AFDB, that's the African Development Bank, Chatham House, UN Africa Renewal, and also a coverage by the Sierra Leone Telegraph indicating that Africa is poised for economic growth in 2025, despite all the challenges, connected to it. And we've been talking to Mr. Ukuku, Professor Nnah, and also Wisdom Chapp-Jumbo. Thank you so much for staying with us, and welcome back, Mr. Ukuku. So just to, reiterate the same question that was asked the other two gentlemen about the significance or the significant contribution of natural resource wealth in the projected growth. We'd love to hear your thoughts on that. And also, if you could, Wisdom talked about regional integration initiatives as well, such as the African Continental Free Trade Area, which are often cited as key drivers of growth. Are there specific statistics that demonstrate how these efforts are already paying dividends? Because Wisdom did say that we've not seen anything positive about the continental free trade yet.
Okay, so let me start with the natural resource wealth, and let me take them bit by bit, because there are a whole lot. Even starting from we ourselves being contributory factors to the growth dynamics, which is being talked about. I'm talking about the citizenry. Then the key thing here. Let's even take solid mineral for example. Now, those were captured, or must have been captured, because one, the robust functionality of your solid mineral sector is highly dependent on the level of infrastructure that you invest in. So if the tax drive is increasing in countries, and then tariffs, border tariffs or border tariffs when it has to do with imports, tariffs is increasing, is because countries need more resources to plunge, or to face, to see how they can bridge the infrastructural gaps. Now, solid minerals, as they are called solid metals. They are so heavy that if you apply them on the roads, the road that you have, the tar roads that you have, will become what will come out of it, you won't like it. So that's why most countries that have improved when it comes to solid minerals, you see that they have a functional rail system. So, which is why I believe that the investment going into the railway system, moving around the whole nation is very key. Also getting into those corridors, export corridors, those solid mineral corridors in Nigeria. Then again, you need to look at agriculture. Now, you see, I don't know why I might have to go back to the issue of leadership, so I'll be able to make myself clear so that everybody will understand what I'm trying to say. Yes, the politicians are always looking ahead for the next election. They look for that election because people give them the mandates. So if, for example, I always give this very simple, short example. A time passed, a particular local government chairman that I know very well tried to build a cassava processing plant in his local government because there's a lot of cassava in his local government. He wanted to do a processing plant for export. Now, by the time he wanted to discuss with the people, I said, okay, this is what I want to do. The people said, no, that's not important to us. The most important thing for us is that we want you to build a meeting hall for the elders to have their meetings because the one they have is already bad. Now, because this guy wants to win the next election, what would he do? He will listen to the elders of the land. So I say that because I want to go back to the issue of leadership, because if the guy forces himself to build the cassava processing plant, and then this happened many years ago anyway, if he did that processing plant, he wouldn't have grown in politics because nobody will vote him. They'll say, oh, that stubborn guy who believes that he knows too much. So this is exactly a vicious circle, which I believe that by the time the citizenry begin to understand, have an awareness of what development is and how to grow a nation, it will help the nation better than you just thinking that a leader will just wake up. That's an authoritarian, for example. Like Prof said, you were mentioning a man like Gaddafi. I don't want to go into all those kind of heavy politics when it comes to global politics. But I mean, if you look at Gaddafi, he was an authoritarian. That was not a leader, as far as I'm concerned. So let's go back to the real issue of developing Africa. So those natural resources are going to be very key. Nigeria is the highest producer of cassava in the world. And Thailand is the second largest producer of cassava in the world. And Nigeria makes less than $200 million from cassava yearly, while Thailand makes about $2 billion from cassava. What does that tell you? There is a skill gap, there is infrastructure gap, and there is this gap when it comes to technology, the technology gap. So if those level of infrastructure we must have them in Africa so that we will be able to grow at the pace where we will have what to contribute to the next African country. So which brings me to the free trade zone. What are we trading? What are we giving? Because you need to have what you are trading to, for a particular policy to be useful to you. Have we even been able to meet the domestic demand for certain goods and services that are being produced here? And let me not make the mistake of using the word produced here, assembled here. Because every single good, except for a few things, end to end, they are all assembled, not produced. Pharmaceutical industry, if you go to the pharmaceutical industry, for example, every single Panadol that somebody who's having a headache swallows is actually assembled in Nigeria, is not made in Nigeria, because the API, which is the active pharmaceutical ingredient, is still gotten from India or gotten from Turkey or gotten from other countries. So it still has a lot to do with being able to grow domestic economy so that you will have what to contribute to the next economy so that those free trade policies can become useful. So are we going to sit back and then say, okay, because we don't have what to give, we should just know? So it challenges you as a nation to begin to grow at the pace where you will have what to give. Because if Ghana begins to produce bitters to a level where bitters becomes cheaper from Ghana, everybody, so that free trade will not be beneficial to Nigeria, but rather will be beneficial to Ghana, because cost of production has reduced in Ghana because a lot of a lot of investment has gone into producing, getting extracts from plants, which is what they are using in addition to support from the raw material supply strategy which they have with cassava to blend ethanol with bitters, and then the bitters will become cheaper from Ghana. So these are the dynamics that we all need to look at, and the practicality of it is those who are industry experts having the opportunity to give the knowledge that they have, then bring in those who have the technical know-how, it becomes a merger. And like I spoke earlier, talking about public-private partnership, there has to be that collaboration with the with the public sector, so that all these things will be, because I mean, no investment is domiciled in the air. It's all going to be situated in some state or the other. So the efficiency, the red tapes, bureaucratic red tapes that exist in such localities must be made open. And who will make them open? So, so the private sector players have to also step out. I say it all the time. We don't have as much private sector as we ought to. What we have most of the time is government patronage. We have people who are close to government, who want to do business with government, until you go through. I say, quote me anywhere, from Zamfara down to the last to saying, you will not find a factory where they extract glucose syrup.
Well, that actually brings us to investor confidence, and I would like Professor Nnah to actually answer that. Mr. Ukuku has actually said quite a lot. He talked about the issue of developing Africa and the need for public-private partnership collaboration. So when it comes to the issue of, investor confidence in Africa, according to these reports, which is quite different from what we heard last year, it's that it appears to be rising. So compared with other emerging markets, what figures best illustrates Africa's comparative advantage in fiscal management?
Thank you very much. I mentioned Gaddafi earlier. Let me clear that. I'll come back to what you're saying. I'm going to mention another name, Thomas Sankara. These individuals were taken out by the West because of their stance in developing their country. If you know the development rate that was going on in Libya before Gaddafi was taken out, you will not say the things you're saying. Let me give you the conspiracy of the West that has kept Africa down. The Ajokuta steel rolling mill was not meant to fly from the one. Russia built that from the one because they didn't want that to function. Go around the world, though that gigantic project in Ajokuta should have been cottage industries spread around the state. Today, Nigeria will be producing nuclear weapons. I can tell you for free. If that Ajokuta mill has been running today, this issue of energy would have been a thing of the past, because the energy that would have been generated from Ajokuta would have, even with the nuclear weapon, the energy that would have been generated in Nigeria would have been enough to even cover most of the countries in Africa. So they made it possible that project will not fly. Today, that project is obsolete. That technology is obsolete. They are now looking for China technology to come and reject it. So you'll find out that it will not work. So it's been the conspiracy of the West to keep Africa down. And that's why I say this thing snowballs at the level of the leadership. If the leaders can come together, and any leader that rises up to challenge the West, they eliminate him. That is what has been happening. So if you don't know that politics is the major issue here, then I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Because the West has made it that they weaponize you either by giving you loans that you cannot pay, or when a leader rises up in Africa to challenge the status quo, they eliminate the person. So going forward, again, outside that Ajokuta still, you still have Africa has, for a long time, even in West Africa, the single currency issue has festered for how many years now? They have not been able to come up with a single currency. Not even now that 3 of the countries have left ECOWAS. So the regional, unity is not even there. So there are a lot of issues that need to be trashed outside the solid minerals and outside the minerals that we have, and outside the arid land that we have, that can give us, that can feed us and feed Europe and America. But the problem has been that of not coming together to challenge some of these issues. Now, I'll give you another typical example. They have been fighting Congo DR. Have you asked yourself why Congo DR has been fighting and UN is pretending to try to solve that problem? I will tell you for free. Last year, one of the UN vehicles that was leaving Congo DR broke down. Do you know what was discovered? Gold bars were loaded, fully loaded, in a van that was supposed to bring relief material to people that are fighting. That is the conspiracy of the West. And that is why I said, except our leaders will now begin to come together and stop these shenanigans of the West, we are not going anywhere, because they have studied us very well. Don't forget that they were colonial masters. They have studied us very well, so they know how to keep you down. The first thing Africa will do to come out of the doldrums is that they must stand up against the West, against the manipulation of the West, and then begin to do things their own way. Like we said before, they should be able to now refine their own products. Look, I said it before, I don't know whether I was cut off. Additional said that even Congo DR has the raw materials to produce electric cars. And he said, going forward, some of these vehicles will be obsolete. And then when these things happen, Africa will be the bride, the beautiful bride. Of course, they know that the raw materials they need is coming from here. And that is why they keep on manipulating our leaders. They keep on manipulating them to dance to their tone. And because of these loans that they are getting, and when they get these loans, the unfortunate thing, like you said, in the 70s, our rail were working. We had rail from Port Harcourt to, I think, as far as Maiduguri or so, or Sokoto. Today, where are the rail lines? Now, Buhari came in and wanted to do the rail lines, but instead of him at least trying to reject the rail lines in Nigeria, he started building one to, what do you call it?
Niger.
Now, these are the issues. And these big traders are spoiling the little roads they have produced. They have been able to build in Nigeria. So we have a lot of challenges. Anybody that is telling you that Africa will just rise overnight, except with some of these challenges, the person is telling you a lie.
All right, Professor. Thank you for that. You talked about, conspiracy of the West to keep Africa down, and also politics being a major issue, and that Africa needs to stand up against the West. Now, just before we quickly wind down, Wisdom. Speaking of the West, it was recently predicted that, U.S.-China trade war will fuel foreign investment inflows in Africa, which is, quite similar to these reports. Now, we know that we're in an era marked by potential trade wars and protectionism. Are there any assessments that highlight these vulnerabilities or even risks that might affect Africa's growth trajectory, since we're all being positive?
Well, in being positive, as we see all of this coming our way, is an opportunity for Africa to diversify their economy. If we don't do that, then when all of these opportunities come, they come to meet nothing because we keep going in one direction. So the opportunity for us is we need to diversify our economy. There's no one way to achieving all of this. So that when this investment comes, we are putting it in different places that we did drive more progress for us, which is very critical. We need to also put more into capital expenditure. We need to look at critical infrastructures that will develop our economy, so that as these investments are coming, we're channeling it into those areas that we did in the future, project more progress for Africa. So where are those infrastructure strategic ones that we can put more money? And of course, in our budgeting, we need to now put more money into more capital expenditure, so that we are able to build the economy. We're able to go for capital projects that will increase more economic prospects for us, as Africans. So I'm speaking from the angle of looking at Nigeria and looking at other West African countries like Ghana and the rest of them. And of course, I'm sure it will be the same issue, up east and up south of Africa. We need to look at where we are going to put some of this money, because as a China-U.S. trade war is coming, and Africa is going to be a beneficiary of it, like the reports are saying. If we're not ready to take these opportunities, then it's going to just fall off. Then there are policies also. Our policies makers need to ensure that they are drafting or legislating on policies that will spur the sustainable development for our different countries. So if those policies are not going to target more of sustainable development for us, then there's no need for it. And there are 17 goals on the SDGs that we can look at when we're making policies and how we can drive that. So we can tie back to that global view of what.
All right, Wisdom. Sadly, we've run out of time. Wisdom, time is not on our side. Yes. I really apologize for cutting you off. But thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us on the conversation this evening and speaking on this. We had Mr. Ogbonna Ukuku. He's an economic development expert in Abuja. We also had Professor Simeon Nnah, a public affairs analyst in Lagos, and also Wisdom Chapp-Jumbo. He's a public affairs analyst in Lagos as well. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us once again.